It was just past midnight when the boy heard it. A sound, soft, low, and distant, like a drum being played underwater. Toom, toom, toom. He sat up in bed, rubbing his eyes. The sound wasn't loud, but it felt close, like it was echoing in his chest. He tiptoed to the window. Nothing. Just the backyard, dark and quiet, with the big tree swaying slightly in the wind. But the sound came again. Toom. This time, he didn't just hear it, he felt it in the floorboards. He grabbed his flashlight and quietly opened the back door. The grass was cold. The wind was warm. He stepped barefoot past the laundry line and toward the trees behind his house. He wasn't afraid. Just curious. That's when he saw it, a light. Faint. Pale. Moving between the trunks of the trees. He followed. The trees grew taller, thicker, and stranger the farther he walked. The leaves began to shimmer. The bark looked like it was breathing. He pushed past a curtain of vines. And stopped. Because standing there, in a clearing lit by moonlight, was a giant. He was taller than the trees. His skin looked like stone, moss-covered and ancient. His eyes glowed faintly like two gentle stars. And he was holding out his hand. The boy didn't run. He didn't scream. He just stared. The giant slowly crouched and opened his palm, like an invitation. The boy stepped in. And then, in one smooth motion, the giant placed the boy gently on his shoulder. The forest around them stretched like a sea of green. Trees like towers. Shadows like rivers. The boy sat on the giant's shoulder and whispered, "Where are we going?" The giant didn't speak. But he began to walk. Toom, toom, toom. And the forest answered with silence. Their journey had begun. The giant walked slowly, each step so soft it barely disturbed the moss beneath his feet. The boy sat on his shoulder, legs swinging gently, hands gripping the edge of the giant's collarbone like a saddle. All around them, the forest listened. Not a single bird sang. Not a single leaf moved without reason. The trees here were older than anything the boy had ever seen, wide and tall, with bark thick as castle walls and roots that curled like sleeping animals. As they walked deeper, the boy noticed something strange. The trees had faces. Not painted. Not carved. Real faces, made of wood and shadow, some smiling faintly, some frowning in their sleep, others watching with eyes half-lidded, as if curious. One tree slowly turned its head to follow them. Another blinked. The boy leaned forward and whispered into the giant's ear, "They're watching us." The giant didn't respond. He simply raised one hand, palm open, and nodded respectfully to the trees. And the trees nodded back. The boy didn't know whether to feel safe or scared. But he did feel small. They passed under an arch formed by two leaning trunks. The air grew cooler. Blue mist curled around their ankles. Soft glowing mushrooms blinked on and off like sleepy fireflies. The forest felt alive. "I think they remember me," the boy said quietly, though he didn't know why. The giant reached up with one finger and gently touched the boy's back, like a pat of agreement. Then they came to a ridge. The trees opened just enough for a view, a valley so wide it swallowed the horizon. And in the middle of the valley was a lake, black and still as glass. The trees whispered among themselves. The boy could almost hear the words. He leaned down again. "What's down there?" he asked. The giant turned slowly and looked him in the eye. His mouth didn't move. But the boy heard a word, inside his head. Listening. The giant stepped carefully down the slope, the earth barely stirring under his feet. The boy held tight to a twist of moss on the giant's shoulder. Below them, the black lake waited, still, silent, watching. As they neared the edge, The sounds of the forest faded. Even the wind seemed to stop. It was as if the world had taken a deep breath and forgotten to let it out. The lake stretched far in every direction, like a puddle spilled from the moon. But what made the boy shiver wasn't its size, it was that it reflected nothing. No trees. No sky. No giant. Just black. They stopped at the shoreline. The giant lowered his hand and gently placed the boy on the soft, mossy ground. The boy stepped forward. Then he heard it. A voice. Faint, quiet, like someone whispering through cup hands. It said his name. Toma. The boy froze. Did you hear that? He asked. The giant said nothing. But he lowered his great head and touched the ground with one hand, as if listening too. Again, the voice came. Toma, do you remember? The boy looked into the lake. And then, just for a second, he saw a shape ripple across the surface. Himself, much younger, running through a field of tall grass. Laughing. Chasing something invisible. He blinked. The image vanished. He sat down slowly, his bare feet brushing the edge of the water. Is it showing me my dreams? He asked aloud. Or maybe, is it showing me what I forgot? The water whispered again, but not in words. Just feeling. A wave of quiet sadness. Then warmth. Then calm. The boy looked up at the giant. Why are you showing me this? The giant blinked slowly. His eyes were kind. And finally, he spoke, not aloud, but in the boy's thoughts. Not all journeys move forward. Some go deeper. Then he stood again, and reached down. The boy climbed back onto his shoulder. And together, they turned from the lake and walked on, deeper into the forest that knew too much and said so little. They walked for a long time after the lake. The forest changed. The trees grew wider apart. The light dimmed. The air felt older. Eventually, the boy saw it rising ahead, a hill, shaped like a sleeping beast, blanketed with moss and tangled roots. But something was strange. There were no birds here. No insects. No wind. And no echo when the giant stepped. The boy leaned forward. Why is it so quiet? The giant didn't answer. He simply climbed the hill, slow and careful. Each step sank slightly, as if the hill was made of breath, not soil. At the top, there was a circle of stones. In the middle, a hole. A round, dark opening into the hill itself. The boy felt something pull at him, not hard, but steady. Like the way dreams sometimes pull you somewhere, and you follow without question. The giant knelt beside the hole. His eyes softened. He reached up, took the boy gently in both hands, and placed him near the entrance. The boy looked down into the dark. And something inside looked back. Not with eyes. With memory. He stepped in. Inside, it wasn't cold or hot. It was hollow, like the inside of a bell. The walls glowed faintly with patterns, circles, spirals, handprints. Like old chalk drawings from someone who no longer remembered their name. In the center of the chamber was a stone, smooth and round, and on it rested a bundle wrapped in leaves. The boy approached slowly. He touched it. The leaves unraveled. Inside was a small, wooden carving. A figure. It looked just like him. Same hair. Same clothes. Same curious eyes. But on the back, something was carved in tiny letters. The boy leaned in and read aloud. You were here. You are here. You will be here again. He held the carving tight. Somewhere above, the giant waited, silent and still. When the boy returned to the surface, the wind had returned, just a little. He climbed back onto the giant's shoulder and whispered, That place remembers. The giant stood. and they walked on. The trees thinned out as they walked. Soon, the forest opened into a wide, golden field, filled with tall grass that shimmered like candlelight. The air was dry but soft. The sky was turning violet, as if evening were arriving inside the dream. The boy sat quietly on the giant's shoulder, his hand still holding the wooden carving close to his chest. "I've never been this far," he whispered. The giant gave no answer. He just walked. The grass brushed gently against the giant's knees. Every few steps, the boy could hear faint voices, not loud, not clear, just soft murmurs, like someone remembering something important in another room. They passed a crooked wooden sign, half swallowed by grass. It read, "Field of Echoes, step gently." The boy leaned low and cupped his hands behind his ears. The whispers got louder. Still not words, but feelings. Laughter, fear, songs hummed to no one. A yawn, a name whispered by someone missing someone else. And then, his own voice. He heard himself say, "I want to stay a little longer." He didn't know when he had said it. Maybe never. Maybe not yet. "Is this a place where dreams leave pieces behind?" he asked. The giant finally stopped walking. He looked out across the endless golden grass. Then he did something strange. He sat a day. Slowly, heavily, folding his legs beneath him until the boy was level with the waving field. The boy climbed down and stood in the grass. It was taller than he was. He walked a few steps away. And every footstep left behind a shape, not a print, but a memory. As he passed, little flickers of light rose from the grass and danced like fireflies. One of them showed him on a swing. Another showed his mother brushing crumbs from his shirt. Another, him, laughing with someone who had no face. He turned to look at the giant. The giant was watching, silent, like always. But something in his eyes shimmered. The boy walked back and sat between the giant's feet. He leaned against one massive leg like a tree trunk. The wind whispered across the field. He didn't say a word. And neither did the giant. The field faded behind them, swallowed by mist. Now, the ground grew steeper, rocky, cracked like old skin. The sky was a deep indigo, with only one pale star above them, watching, like an eye that never blinked. The boy, now sleepy but not yet tired, leaned against the giant's shoulder, his fingers tracing the carved figure he carried. They came upon a cliff. At the edge stood a single stone arch, tall and cracked, rising from the earth like the remains of a doorway to somewhere long forgotten. It had no door, just the shape of one. The boy blinked. Something about it felt patient, like it had been standing there for 1,000 years just waiting for them. The giant stopped. He lifted the boy and placed him gently in front of the arch. The boy approached, but the air felt heavier here, like walking through syrup. On the side of the arch, small symbols glowed, simple, childlike carvings. They lit up one by one as he stepped closer. Not words. Moments. Him walking barefoot on sun-warmed tiles. Him hiding under a table from thunder. Him touching a window on the first day of rain. "These are mine," he whispered. Then one final symbol appeared. A shape of him, asleep on the giant's shoulder. The arch gave a low hum. And in the boy's chest, something shifted. He realized the dream was slowing down. He turned back to the giant, who now looked almost like a hill, still and silent against the sky. "Do we go through?" he asked. The giant gave the smallest nod. But the boy didn't step forward. He turned and walked back, placing his hand on the giant's cheek, warm, mossy, and still a stone. "I don't want to wake up yet," the boy whispered. The giant placed one finger softly on the boy's head. And for the first time, he smiled. They left the arch behind, not by stepping through it, but by turning away from it, together. The path was narrow now, more root than soil. Trees leaned in close, branches drooping low as if listening. The light was different here, thinner, slower, like it took longer to fall. The boy yawned. Just once. Then again. The giant, sensing it, slowed his pace. He reached up gently and cupped the boy in both hands, lowering him from his shoulder to rest in the crook of one arm, like carrying something very, very important. The boy didn't protest. He curled up without words, still holding the carved figure close to his chest. They passed strange shapes in the woods, half-formed huts, piles of old shoes, an upside-down door hanging from nothing. The boy barely looked. His eyelids were heavy now. "I think I've seen enough," he mumbled. The trees began to hum softly. Not a melody, just the kind of sound you might hear inside your own breath. The giant's footsteps slowed. And then, a clearing. At its center stood a tree, taller than all others, with bark that shimmered like water and leaves that didn't move. The giant approached and sat at its base. He placed the boy beside him, leaned back slowly, and tilted his head up to the stars between the leaves. The boy lay down on the soft moss, eyes barely open. "I don't know where we are," he whispered. The giant didn't answer. But the boy didn't need one. His fingers loosened around the little carving. His breathing slowed. And just before his eyes closed, he whispered again, "Thank you." Then silence. The kind that only comes in dreams. The forest faded. Not all at once. First the sound. Then the light. Then the soft weight of air around him. The boy stirred. He was lying in his bed. The blankets slightly kicked off. The window cracked open just enough to let in the early sun. He blinked. His ceiling looked different after a dream like that. Too flat. Too quiet. He sat up slowly, unsure for a moment whether he was still dreaming. The room was just as he left it. Toys on the shelf, socks on the floor, curtains swaying a little. But something felt full, like the space between things had been changed. He looked down. His hand was empty. No carving. No moss. No trace of the forest, the giant, or the long walk through trees that watched. But as he stood and stepped to the window, bare feet against cool floorboards, he saw something. Out in the yard. Just for a second. A giant footprint. Faint. Almost gone. Just a dent in the grass. He smiled. Then he heard a low sound. Tomb. Or maybe not. Maybe it was just a truck down the road. Or maybe it was something else, walking back into the deeper woods, where dreams fold themselves like old maps and wait. He turned from the window. He wasn't tired anymore. But he wasn't quite awake either. He was something in between. And for now, that was enough.